Kim, I didn't like discuss your biography or anything like that. I think that's really up to you what you'd like to share with everyone before you. But just tell us a little bit about yourself, and then if you could start your wonderful presentation, we'd be psyched.
Sure. Let me do this. So hopefully you can see that, and then I need to just find your beautiful faces again so that they come back over in the screen. Well, sorry about that. It's always fun with multiple screens and seeing where it tends to send people. So anyway, okay. So today we're going to be talking about emerging culture and what does that look like, or what could that look like? I am Kim Antelo. I'm kind of new to Denver. I've only been living in the Denver area for about 3 years. But for the people who I've worked with who have been from here, they've always said that like my heart belongs here. I am actually from the Midwest originally, so from Cincinnati, and but like I said, my heart is definitely here. My background has been very interesting. I started off as a developer in the 90s. Yes, I am a little bit older than most people would assume from looking at my Zoom. And you can see on here, this is a picture of my family. That's my husband, who's an aerospace engineer, and then my son, who will be a sophomore at Boulder, I guess next week. So we've always been a big hiking family. I'm actually not sure where this picture was taken, but just something that I have used. I have spent my entire career in highly regulated, very large organizations until about the last 3 years when I went into consulting. I had the opportunity to work directly with Jeff Sutherland, who is the co-creator of Scrum and the creator of Scrum at Scale. So you can see the picture of me with him when we were actually announcing the joint venture between Scrum Inc. and Scrum Alliance. That's a different story, a couple of years ago at the Scrum Gathering. I am a product owner at heart, so I like to go on customer field trips. The picture on the top right is a picture of me at Los Angeles Power and Water Department as they were building a new power plant, or a section to a power plant. And you should have seen the guy's face at the guard shack when I showed up and said, hey, I'm here to watch you guys as you're building a power plant. So that was all kinds of fun and interesting. Lots of fun and interesting things to actually see the mechanics doing the work and figuring out how we could stop them from entering stuff into their computer systems half of the time, and actually, getting them to turn wrenches and to build power plants and to fix machines instead of entering stuff into systems. I'm a part of the Agile Leadership Journey Group with Pete Behrens, and I'm also a Path to Agility facilitator. I like things to be very interactive, so I would really enjoy the improv session that you're gonna have next month. So that's just a little bit about me, and really it's just that I've been doing a lot of hands-on stuff. I've kind of walked into a lot of the places that I did within my career. None of it was planned. Some of it was taking side steps, and some of it was just diving in when someone asked me to. So, oh, there we go. So we're here to talk about culture, and I actually pulled this from the 14th annual State of Agile report, which just came out in May. And I don't know if people have seen the more recently updated version of this as it came out during COVID. But it's interesting because as we look at organizations that are trying to adopt Scrum and Agile in their organizations, we're seeing some of the same things that are continuing to happen. So we see that there's a general organizational resistance to change. Hey, I know what I had been doing. I know what I needed to do to be successful there. We know that there's not typically been enough leadership participation. So oftentimes, especially as Agilists, if we're in the consulting or coaching roles, maybe the leaders would say, hey, I heard about this Agile thing. I need you people to go through training and get some coaching, but that's for you. I still need my Gantt charts, right? I still need my roadmaps that look the same. Inconsistent processes and practices across teams. So we see that where what done means to one team is completely different than done to another team. And then a good thing is that this organizational culture at odds with Agile values is actually moving down the list. In the past, that has been a little bit higher, but it's still at 44% of people responding, saying that that's still a really big issue with adopting Agile in their workspaces. So my question to you is, are any of you running into any of these issues? You can just quick hands up if you've got your camera on. Yeah, okay, so a couple of people. Great, so we'll definitely talk about basically all of these things. So being able to adapt to the resistance to change, how can we engage leadership as we go through the process and allow them to help us with being able to change culture. We won't talk as much about the inconsistent processes and practices, but then how do we actually address cultural issues that might be at odds with the Agile values? So that's what I hope to get through in the next hour. Okay, how many of you know who Patrick Lencioni is? Okay, good, got some hands. So he's the guy that wrote the book 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. He also wrote a ton of other books, Ideal Team Member or Ideal Team Player, and another book that he wrote is The Advantage. And in the book, The Advantage, he talks about this trap that many companies and many organizations fall into. And they're focused on being a smart organization. So they have a good strategy, they've got strong financials, they've got really great creative marketing teams that are, doing all of the social media shares. Hopefully we've got sound technology. I've been in a lot of companies that don't have a lot of sound technology, but hopefully they have that. And then hopefully they have competitive products. But as what Patrick Lencioni says that he continues to run into is that we have problems where companies and organizations are not leveraging the healthy portion of their organization. So they're saying, hey, I just need to be smarter and I need to follow those things that are on the left side of the screen here. But they're not necessarily focusing on the things on the right. Sounds a little familiar, like with the Agile Manifesto, right? There's the stuff on the left and the stuff on the right, although in this case, we want them to be a little bit flipped. Marie, I'm gonna spotlight my video because it shows that yours is spotlighted. Can everyone see me when I'm talking, or do you see Marie?
See you.
Okay, then I'll leave it on. Okay, cool. So in order to be a healthy organization, Patrick Lencioni specifically talks about minimizing politics, minimizing confusion, like how do I get things into production? How do I get through a specific process? What can we do to increase our morale, which we know will reduce our turnover, and ultimately will increase our overall productivity? And if we're focusing on that high productivity and having engaged employees, then the stuff on the left, the smart organization, becomes pretty easy to do. So one of the ways that I typically like to look at this is leveraging the Kotter model for leading change. And so Kotter talks about creating this sense of urgency, building a coalition, forming the strategic vision and initiative, enlisting a volunteer army, enabling and removing barriers, generating short-term wins, and accelerating and then actually making the change. However, oftentimes when we go into organizations, we don't necessarily have the leadership that's bought in. I mean, at the beginning, I talked about, leaders are still asking for their Gantt charts. They're still creating those annual budgets. So what we're really going to talk about, the majority of today, is kind of the bottom part of this. What can we do to really create change within our organization and to create that conversation between us and then the leadership team to really be able to make changes? Sound like a plan? Okay.
Yes.
Another interesting piece, and a lot of people don't talk about this, is that at about the same time that Jeff and Ken created the Scrum Values, Kotter added a couple of things to his leading change piece. And so you see these 4 things on the outside here. So switching from management, but also making sure that we're including leadership. How can we be servant leaders? How can we make sure that we're talking about the vision and creating innovation and celebrating people? as opposed to just telling people what they need to do. Making sure that we're not just looking at the select few, but we're creating that diverse many. We're allowing for this army of people, the volunteer army, to really be able to come together and to share what we've learned, which helps us with these short-term wins. I've been in organizations where they've said all of the communications about Agile and our success stories need to go through the communications team. Well, that slows everyone down, and that actually stifles and stops people from being able to share their stories. So just having a group of people come together and say, hey, here's this really awesome thing. We interacted with our customers, put it on, create a quick video, put it on Yammer or whatever communication tool that you have in your company, helps to get more and more people who are really involved. And that kind of goes into this next one, which is, do I have to do this Agile thing, or do I want to do this? And as we start to hear more and more people talking about the fact that they feel like they're engaged, the fact that they're working together better, they get into more of that want to. And again, another thing that we have to think about is not just appealing to dollars and cents, which we might need to do if we're talking specifically to leadership, but as we're talking to employees, especially the people who might be a little bit harder to get to, as we're thinking about expanding our Agile footprint or about changing our actual culture, is to not only appeal to the head, but also to the heart, okay? So these are some of the things that I specifically would focus on as we're going into an organization or even working from within the organization. And I'll tell you a couple of stories about what that looks like, but not necessarily having this, the pieces up at the top, which are great if you do have them, but even if your leadership is not yet on board, figuring out how you can start to enlist that army of volunteers, the people who are across the organization who have the same ideals that you have and are hoping to make the organization a better place, and hopefully following the Agile manifesto values as well as the Scrum values. So I'll just pause because I know I talk really fast. Does anybody have any questions?
I don't see anything in the chat.
I don't
yet,
see
either.
anything.
No.
Someone asked about Skyline Chili, and yes, you can actually buy Skyline Chili at King Soopers since it is a subsidiary of Kroger. The one in Greenwood Village does have it on stock. During the whole COVID thing, when there was nothing on the shelves, I could get my Skyline still. And that is Cincinnati chili for anyone who's asking. It is cinnamon and chocolate in the chili. Thank
Oh.
you to Charles for raising that.
Is that like
That's
a
good
mole?
stuff.
Is it what?
Like a mole?
A mole?
Like a chocolate Mexican sauce?
Yeah.
It has meat in it. It's probably like grade F meat, but like it is still technically meat.
Grade F.
Okay.
It's so funny because I don't eat beans. I love Cincinnati chili without the beans. I'm like,
Really? Wow.
oh yeah,
Okay.
I know.
So, great. And no, it's not beef goulash. Okay. So, I mean, I talked over here about appealing to the emotions and appealing to the people and sharing the stories. And that also really ties into some of the work by Chip and Dan Heath in Switch, when they specifically talk about rallying the herd, showing them what the destination looks like and where we're actually trying to go to. So I like to take both the Kotter and the Switch models and kind of pull them together and figure out how can we get people to start to change the way that we work at work, and what are the things that we actually need to do to help address those things. According to Gandhi, he says a lot of people actually shorten this and say, be the change that you wish to see in the world. And if we're actually talking about how can we change our culture at work, the first thing that we need to do is to figure out what can we actually do? What's the span of control that we have? What are the influences that we can definitely use and to leverage? So it says, if we can change ourselves, the tendencies in the world would also change. As man changes his own nature, so does the attitude of the world changes towards him. We need not to wait to, we we need not wait to see what others do. So you don't have to wait for the leaders. You don't have to wait for someone else. I'm going to challenge you between now and the next 45 minutes or so to think about what are some things that are happening in your organization. What are some things that you can start to do to help actually change your culture? And we'll talk about that as we move forward. So we can change our structure, we can change our systems, but the first place that we really need to start is to change ourselves. And Dr. Goldratt says, tell me how you measure me, and that's how I'll behave. And we know that a lot of people behave based on their incentives. We know that based on, you know, HR practices and saying, oh, well, if you're highly specialized in this area, then you'll be promoted. Well, that doesn't necessarily get you to want to mentor others in your particular specialty. It doesn't get you to necessarily want to learn the jobs of other people so that you can be a more cross-functional or a T-shaped person. So we definitely want to look at what can we do to address some of these things, and how can we, you know, escalate them up through leadership to make change. So then the question is, well, why don't other people want to change? Why are people resisting that organizational change? And so these are pretty easy. I know what it is to be successful. I got to where I am because I knew the rules that I was playing by, and now you want to change the rules on me. So that generates some resistance, some fear. They don't necessarily know the rules of the new game. They go into that fight or flight stance where they're trying to figure out, like, am I going to have a job after this? I'm in middle management. Does that mean I'm going to be fired because everyone's self-managing and self-organizing? And sometimes people are just not open to new ideas. So we have to figure out, where are they and what incentivizes them to work the way that they do? And is there something that we could do to help them see that, hey, there could be a better way of working? But one of the things that we know is that you can't just change the culture. You have to change the system that people are actually behaving inside. For example, if I'm incentivized to get deeper in my specialty as opposed to being more cross-functional, I'm not going to spend time with actually doing that. So how can we go about doing that? So culture is enforced by the system, and the system is really persuaded by policies, structures, and metrics. So these are just 3 things that we could do. So for example, if you're in technology, and I actually typically don't always, well, I don't always work in technology. I've gotten to work in hospitals and finance and some other interesting things. But maybe a metric that is driving this culture of, hey, get more features out faster. If we know that we have a huge cost of maintaining our products, maybe a metric that we could start to look at is, hey, how can we measure our tech debt? And then maybe we could put into place some policies that says no team can add in any additional tech debt into the platform without approval from whomever. And so that might help us with having a conversation of, hey, product owner, I know you want more stuff, but do you understand the implications of this? And so having some air cover with the leadership, maybe on the technical side, to be able to help you with that. But then also being open and saying, hey, there are times when we're going to build things that are going to have more technical debt, but it's okay because we know that we're going to go back and fix it, or we know that we're just doing kind of a proof of concept at this point in time. So with that, that should get us to a point where developers are feeling like they're more safe to openly discuss balancing doing the right thing versus just doing it fast, okay? So this is just one set of scenarios that you could go through to, as an organization, start to measure these things. Another one is in this lighter blue. So unresolved impediments must be elevated to an Agile practice, an Agile council, an Agile, whatever you want to call them, within 72 hours or however many hours. And this comes from leaders saying, hey, you're telling me that I'm supposed to be removing impediments, but I'm not getting any impediments. Well, why aren't you getting any impediments? And it could be, well, the leadership team isn't looked at as a servant leadership team. Maybe it's that impediments that get raised get pushed right back down and are told, you should just fix this on your own. So maybe some metrics that you could specifically implement would be how many impediments are actually resolved within the teams, or what is the actual turnaround time for leadership to resolve impediments. Now, this one is a little bit interesting because as organizations are starting to get through this process where leaders are moving more from management to leadership, in the beginning we might say, hey, we want more impediments to go to leadership because people don't feel empowered. They don't feel like they've been delegated the power or the authority to do what they need to. But then after we get to the point where leaders are starting to empower the teams, that number might actually go down, and we want it to go down because teams are now starting to remove their own impediments. They're solving their own problems and feeling like, instead of feeling like they have to go to their mom or dad to fix the problem for them. So my question to you all, and we're gonna go to a breakout room. So Marie, if you could get breakout rooms ready, like 6 or 7 people. I'm going to ask you to, in your groups, in your teams, to have a quick discussion. Are there any metrics or incentives in your organizations that you would maybe like some help from your colleagues? And right now we're just going to be brainstorming. So are there metrics or incentives that are driving anti-agile behavior in your organization? So we'll give you about 5 minutes to have a group conversation to just brainstorm them. We're not going to ask you to solve them. We're not going to ask you to do anything more with them yet. We'll do that towards the end of the session. So Marie, so we're going to get 5 minutes. You're going to go in a random group of people, and you're just going to talk about what metrics or incentives are driving anti-agile behaviors. Marie, you're muted.
That's usually a good thing, but right now it wasn't. So I'm going to open all the rooms, folks. You should see a message that says, join. Also be alerted to while you're in your breakout room, there might be a message up top. We'll be able to talk to you. So just, keep your eye on that, but ready, set, go, bye-bye. There's still an awful lot of you that haven't moved into your room yet. If you have any questions, let us know. Go on unmute, or unmute yourself if you're not sure how to get into a breakout room. Okay, so David, we still see you in the room. If you want to stay, that's great. But if you have a problem getting into a room, please let me know, as well as Greg and Roxanne, Mark. I tried moving people around, so in case they're having.
I put a timer on. We're 2.5 minutes left.
Okay. Usually I've had that set up, but I didn't do it this time. So
It's okay.
So you're a rock star. Thank you very much. A really old friend of mine popped in because I've spent like 18 years at HP. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it's so funny. It's like, hey, hi. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so great to see you. So now we're getting together. It's like, oh, because I live in, basically Denver, and everybody else lived in Fort Collins. So.
Oh yeah.
So.
I know someone who works at HP. Her name is Icky.
There was so many people.
Yeah.
Is she up here?
And she's in Fort Collins.
Oh, okay.
She's some kind of manager. Yeah, she's an Asian woman. Her name is Icky.
Okay. Yeah.
Participates in the Agile Leadership Journey group, but isn't a guide. I don't know.
I left in 2013,
Okay.
but I was part of that, that whole Agile transformation that they think they wrote about in whichever book it was, I can't remember. But when it hit HP, it was really interesting. I could tell you that story someday. And this is about the culture and transformation. It was crazy. You're forgetting to tell,
Not the Phoenix Project?
I don't think that's what it was called. I don't know. Because we didn't know we were being written about, right?
Yeah.
It's like,
so it says there's a minute left. Can
Okay.
I don't know what the timer is set. If it's generally defaults to a minute to tell them they have a minute to come back.
I think it does. Okay, hold on.
And how many groups were there?
7, hold on. I think it was 7.
Okay. And then you hit the close the room button.
There we go. Yeah, there's 7 rooms. Yeah.
So Roxanne, I don't know if she's on because she didn't pop into a room, but I'm assuming that picture is at Barcelona. However, it looks very similar to the one in Peru.
Huh. Roxanne, you're on mute if you're here. She might have had to step out.
It's fine.
Yeah.
When you go to Amore Park in Lima, it looks just like the one in Barcelona.
Oh, she's working out, she said. She's watching. That's too funny. That's a great idea. Shoot.
Working out while she's watching this. That is,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's priceless.
Wait, we weren't done. Just kidding.
I know, right?
That's okay. Hopefully you were able to talk about a couple of things.
Thank you to my room for, accepting the newbie.
Oh, her photo is in Barcelona. Okay, great. So that's at Gaudi Park in Barcelona. Anyway, okay, so how did we do? Did anybody have any problems? Is anyone in their offices, are they incentivizing anti-agile behavior that anyone would like to share, and you do not have to share your company? Or
we had some good
friend
ones in
has a
my
problem.
group.
Go ahead, Erica.
Well, I'd like to invite Noel and Maruthi to share theirs rather than doing it for them if they want, or put in chat you want me to do it for you. Doesn't matter.
Oh, I can do it. I'm
Okay.
a big woman. So my company started implementing Basecamp in December, and then we got a message on Basecamp from the CTO and his sidekick that in about March, that if we don't start posting regularly or posting period, that we won't get bonuses or raises, and that they know who posts. So basically these people who should be really busy with really important stuff are busy trolling all of us.
Wow.
Yeah,
So what kind of bad behavior would that then drive?
It's not so much that it's bad behavior, it's a lot of anger and lack of trust.
Okay.
So it's really more, it's becoming a really bad, systemic, unhealthy problem. And there's just a lot of animosity towards developers, which is something I don't understand, because I also experienced this at a corporation. I'm in a startup right now. So
Okay.
I don't know if, like, what is this problem with developers? Like, you don't trust them to do their work? Like, anyway.
Yeah, that's definitely been something I've run into historically. And would anyone else like to share? What are some anti-agile behaviors that your companies are driving based on their metrics?
I can share actually. I'm on a server team, and I think partly the problem also is that there are a lot of teams dependent on you, and I guess there is a pushing word sooner. So sometimes that really affects the dev and QA relationship, and QA gets sidelined at times because of this rush to produce work. So that definitely is an anti-pattern.
Yeah, so putting the two groups against each other as opposed to figuring out a way of working together. And then just one more.
I think I'll just throw one out there.
Go ahead.
Coming from a non-traditional agile world, but everything, our bonuses are all reflected on ROI. How much is your project going to do, and when can we move on to the next one? So when it comes down to project selection, or how long is that taken, what's that earned value looking like? So a lot of the strict PMP type project metrics that we use, instead of how well are we adapting and moving this project along. So, and I think one of the bad behaviors I would do is it's really hard to get loyalty on anything because you're just trying to hurry up, speed through something, get it out and move on to the next one, right? Like, okay, hey, can we just keep this train going type of thing? So.
Well, that's interesting, Ken, because oftentimes when people have that mentality, it's, hey, here's the perceived ROI that we think that we're getting off of this. But because they're just quickly moving on to the next thing, you're not actually getting feedback. It's not going back into the system to know, hey, are customers even using this, or do they want to use this? Is this beneficial or valuable? I don't know if that's the situation that you're in, but sometimes you got to focus on things that aren't necessarily bringing in the dollars.
I agree 100%.
Great. So one of the ways that I have been able to, I need to reshare my screen. One of the ways that I've been able to work with leaders to kind of help address some of these things is to really focus on how can we frame these issues that we're talking about in a way that leadership is going to A, listen, but then B, start to empower the organization to be able to make changes on their own without things having to go all the way up the ladder. So I'm just going to give you a preview of this. We'll come back to this in a little bit, and we'll actually share it before our next breakout. But I was at an organization where there was fear to speak. And it was very similar to the story that I was telling you about with the impediments. The leadership team said, hey, we're not getting any impediments. I don't understand what the problem is. And we found that every time that a Scrum Master would say, hey, we have this problem with the team, can you help us with solving this? The leadership team, mostly at the middle manager level, would say, hey, you should figure this out. You have the ability to figure this out. And they really weren't empowered to be able to resolve some of those issues. So we created this template, and it says sample. I'm not by any means saying that you have to use this template, but it's a place that you could maybe start. And in this template, we were able to be able to help articulate and to create that conversation between the teams, the Scrum Master, and then the leaders in the organization to say, hey, this is what's going on, and this is what we've already tried, and this is why it's causing an impact in our business. So first of all, what is the overall impediment? What's the issue that we have? And maybe that's, hey, stop looking over our shoulder as we're posting into Basecamp. What is the impact? Well, people feel like they're, being watched over, and then they aren't delivering as high code, or maybe they're posting things when they shouldn't be posting things. And then what have we done to remove the impediment? So maybe in that case, it doesn't necessarily make sense, but in other cases, being able to show, hey, leaders, we've tried to remove this impediment, or we've tried to remove this roadblock by doing A, B, and C. What would be the reason for us to do that?
So one of the things that I've learned is if you can demonstrate that you've done everything within your power to mitigate it, then you've demonstrated like, okay, I've done as much as I can do, I need some help. And then it shows that you weren't necessarily passive, but you did also have an active hand in things. And now it's their turn to step up to the plate.
Yeah, absolutely, Ken. So being able to show, hey, I'm not just complaining, I'm not just whining about this thing, but I've taken some steps, I've tried to do everything that I can. And an interesting thing is when you get to, hey, I sent this to sourcing and they said that I couldn't approve it, that you needed to approve it. When they see a couple of those things, then they'll say, hey, why does sourcing need my approval to do these things? Like, hey, you're spending $1,000, I don't really care. We just spent $1,000 tracking that request. So then you can maybe start to change some of the policies and some of the metrics that your organization is tracking, or that they have in place. And you can start to make some of those, that change, but without really framing it in this way to say, hey, we've already tried these things. Or then the next step is, what else would I do to resolve this? Hey, I keep running into this barrier and I need to send it to the next level person in order to get approved. I'm doing this 20 times a month, or my team is doing this so often. This is the impact. And then being able to clearly articulate, what can I do, or what can we as a team do to improve some of the problems that we have as an organization, in higher quality, faster ways, as opposed to sending everything up to our managers and our leadership to be able to address them. Any questions or comments on that? Okay.
I think just want to say one thing. In my experience, things are never planned. It's mostly reactionary.
Yeah.
And that's what I've come across in maybe the 10 companies I work for. So.
Yeah, oftentimes it's not planned. It's, hey, I ran into this thing. What can I do to try to resolve it? What are the things that I'm doing? And then as a team, what could we do to actually change what we would do? I was at another organization, and at the leadership level, they were trying to figure out, what's the career path for Scrum Masters? This was a big impediment that was being raised for them. So the leadership team went off and created a whole career path for Scrum Masters and coaches. And they came back with this big, ugly, complicated thing that none of the Scrum Masters or coaches really wanted. But if they could have gone with some sort of request saying, hey, we don't have a career path for Scrum Masters. Here are some general ideas that we have. What are your thoughts on this? And, could we, take some time to really drill into what this would look like, as opposed to saying, hey, leaders, mommy, daddy, can you fix this problem for us? Instead, being able to create your own destiny and to have your own journey. Seth, it looks like you're laughing a little bit. He's on mute.
Yeah, no, just when you said, yeah, call me daddy. I've never heard that in the business context, but it makes sense.
But sometimes we do treat the leaders in our organization like they're our parents and they're supposed to solve our problems. And not because we don't want to solve our own problems, but maybe that's the way that the organization has been running for the past, 20 or 30 years. I mean, I remember when SOX was put into place, when all of a sudden we went from one day being able to put stuff into production whenever we wanted to you're not allowed to touch anything. So that has been going on for so long. Now we've got to figure out, how do we swing that pendulum back? How do we really start to empower people? And how do we have that conversation with leaders to really allow them to make some changes?
Hey, Kim.
So oh, go ahead.
I'm just wondering, looking at this impediment template, that's a mouthful. If you ever have considered including a fifth question, like, how would we know we succeeded? Something that would point them towards measurement of some sort?
Yeah, absolutely. That would be a great idea. And anytime we talk about impediments or roadblocks that are going up to leadership, it's always that the teams who raise them are the ones who can say that they're accepted. Not just that we're going to move something in Jira or in Rally to say, hey, it's done, right? We need them to, we need the teams who raise them to accept them. But yes, Erica, that's a great point.
One thing I like about this, Kim, is in one way, this is just kind of like a user story, right? So this is an opportunity and an encouragement to collaborate and to have a conversation.
Yeah.
Whereas before, what was happening is it was a request goes up, an email, whatever, and there's no real conversation.
Yeah.
This says, well, let's find out more. And I do like that idea of, so that would be I like what Erica said, because that would be the acceptance criteria to use the same model.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
the collaboration seems to be what you're after here.
Right, and it's interesting because I've talked to, about a month or so ago, I was talking to an Agile coach, and they said, oh, well, Scrum Masters, they can remove some impediments, but then they just get into this cultural stuff, or they get into the organizational stuff, and they're like, well, I don't know what to do. And I've really found that using a template like this, or something similar, helps to create that conversation, and helps you to better articulate, like, what is the impact of this? And so we'll talk about some of those things as we move on. So, fear to speak. I was leading transformation at a very large, very old organization. And I pulled together all of this information. I had traveled all over the world. I had these org challenges boards that I had in each one of my training sessions. And I said, fill out a Post-it note. No one knows what your handwriting is like. And put it on the wall if you think that there's an organization challenge that might prevent us from being successful. And I pulled all of that stuff together across the world. I got to go to India and all over Europe, and came back and pulled together kind of a report, a summary to send to the CIO and his leadership team. Now, this is pretty heavily redacted because you would be able to know who the company was if it wasn't. But basically, this was the email that went to the CIO and his leadership team. And it said, people are excited about doing this work. However, they don't really feel like you're going to address some of the cultural issues, like the ability to say no. Being able to ask questions, am I even working on the right things? In this particular organization, there were product owners who said, we're working on all of this stuff that's on our roadmap, and no one's gonna use it. We know that no one's gonna use it. The users can't even, we can't get them to come to our reviews because they don't care about it, because it's not even useful to them. But someone at some higher level said, hey, you need to put these features in. Have any of you ever had that experience? Yeah, head shaking, absolutely. Limit the priorities. The peanut butter and jelly example of just spreading everybody super thin because we're working on all of these priorities. And then, you know, lots of different surprises that are showing up. And then telling the truth. I had a VP in IT who was like, yeah, I should be bringing this to you in July to tell you that we have to do this thing. But I'm sure if I bring it to you in December, then my team will be able to get that done before the end of the year. And it was like, what are you talking about? No, if it's important, let's talk about, is this more important than the other stuff or not? And so one of the things that we did was also talk about the beliefs of the organization and compared that to the Agile Manifesto. And it's funny because the company's belief system was very much so aligned with the Agile Manifesto, but people couldn't come up with a belief of like empowering teammates. It's like that would be a value or a belief that the organization should really be attaching itself to and figuring out how can we get better. And so my action to the leadership team was to say no to their business partners, to stop lying to themselves about what could be done in the amount of time, and to their stakeholders. Make sure that they're actually working on the right stuff instead of, you know, the teams, they're not going to be motivated to deliver their best work if no one's actually working on stuff. And then empowering the teams to self-organize. Don't tell them how to do the work, and don't tell them who needs to be on the teams, especially if you're splitting teams. So I had originally put this communication together and I sent it out to the Agile practice, the people who were helping me, that rally of volunteer army, that volunteer army that was helping me with the Agile transformation. And they said, Kim, if you send this out, you are going to be fired. They all thought that if I sent it out, I was telling the truth to leadership and it was something that they didn't want to hear and that I would be fired. Well, I didn't get fired. I actually got a free vacation to Key West. That was my reward for this. And so this was the response from the CIO. And he was like, hey, this is great data. We need to take a hard look at it. We need to lead, not just manage. Take it to heart. And then, you know, lots of great things. But sometimes we have to have courage, which is one of the Scrum values. And we have to be open and we have to share with the leaders in a way that they'll be willing to listen and to say, here are the actual issues that we have as an organization. Getting that rally, that herd of people behind us, actually talking to people and seeing what the issues are, and then figuring out how can we actually go about addressing it. So figuring out, again, how can you create that leadership story and how can you talk to those people? And sometimes you're not going to have as supportive of a CIO as I had in this particular organization, but is there someone that you can use and that you can leverage as the champion?
Hey,
Go ahead.
can I ask you a quick question about that? How many people did you find told you that they had tried to say these same things to management anywhere up the chain?
I would say that there were a couple of people who had told like their middle manager, but that it hadn't gone to the highest levels of the organization. And so in this particular case, the CIO was very much so on board, and you could tell he was letting go of people who were not on board. So as people who are part of our Agile Council, that volunteer army, as they were coming up and saying, hey, I've been wanting to do this. I've been wanting to change the way that we work. I want us to do impactful work. As we started to go through that, they were running into those middle managers who had been with the company for 30, 40 years that weren't making the changes.
Yeah,
So,
one reason I ask is the difference between people trying within the organization to make the improvements like you're suggesting versus the magic of the consultant who comes in and says the exact same things and suddenly everyone listens.
to be clear, I was an employee at this organization.
Oh, very good. Okay.
Yes.
A special employee though.
I was a special employee, yes. I've always been one to kind of speak my mind. So yeah. Okay. So one of the things that as we're talking about culture change and changing the system and the structures within the organization is always having that transparency, figuring out how can we pull the information together? How can we see what the actual problems are? What can we do to inspect and then adapt? And then also, how do we bring together our Scrum values, if that's what you're using, to really be open, be respectful, sometimes be courageous. One of the things that I say that's hard about being a Scrum Master or an Agile coach is always kind of being on that brink, just pushing the line to almost get fired, but not quite get fired, right? So you have to have the courage to be open and tell them maybe things that they don't necessarily want to hear all the time. So I think that Scrum Masters should get paid lots of money so that they have financial security so that they can say the right things to help to drive the right behavior. Oops. Okay. So one of the things, and I'll tell the story quick because I am running a bit out of time, but at that organization, one of the things that you heard about was, hey, we're working on all sorts of stuff. We're not working on anything that is important. And so one of the things that we were able to do was to not get rid of the vice presidents, but kind of take them out of the picture of what's the work that we're actually working on. And we pulled together a bunch of the directors in the organization and had them really work together to get rid of Conway's Law. So Conway's Law says that your product is going to look like your organization. And that was definitely the case in this particular organization. None of the people, none of the middle managers had any clue what anyone else was building. And so I had one of the best product owners that I've ever worked with. He said, hey, I went to this other team and saw what they were doing. I went to the review and literally they're building about 90% the same exact thing that my team is building. And they had the same customers. So literally they had customers that were going into one system, they were doing some stuff, then they were going into the other system and they're like, they're not even the same like UI. So we were able to get those leaders together and have them talk about what are the products, have them actually take into consideration some good product management tools like vision statements, lean canvases, having them do demos within each other. And then they were able to get rid of a lot of the waste and they were able to work together with a team of teams as opposed to their traditional hierarchy. They spent a lot of time working together, but then we could make sure that they were working on the most important thing. And by giving the employees the voice to be able to say, hey, this doesn't make any sense. No one's using this. We were really empowering the product owners within the organization to make sure that we were working on the most important thing. This is another funny story. So another way that as Scrum Masters or coaches, that you can really focus on helping the culture within your organization is by tracking the happiness metric. And so this was in a Harvard Business Review article quite a while ago. But one of the things that you can actually do as a Scrum Master or as a coach is to ask your teams, how happy are you? And so we don't want to talk about like the elections and that kind of stuff, but like, how happy are you in your role? So what's your role on the specific team? The team itself, the company. If you're in a smaller company, you might not need to ask all of those. And then the question of what would make you feel better? So there were a couple of guys in the office, and they said, hey, if we could wear shorts, we would be happier. And I was just like, really, you want to wear shorts? Oh, okay. So I took some information and then marched into the office of the VP of engineering and said, the developers want to wear shorts. Do you have a problem with that? And he's like, no, I don't care. They can wear whatever they want. So I got on Yammer and sent out a message and says, as of Friday, everyone is allowed to wear shorts. If you're not from Hazard and your name's not Daisy, you're not allowed to wear her shorts. But otherwise, wear, professional shorts. So what happened? There were a group of people who showed up in the office wearing shorts. Sounds great, right? But then there were some managers, and they went over, and I'm going to pick on Nancy. They said, Nancy, shorts are not very professional, and I know that you're looking to get that senior role in the next year, and it's probably not a good idea for you to wear those very unprofessional clothes to work. So then what's the impact to Nancy and to her teammates? They're like, we asked for something, leadership said, yeah, go do it, and now you're telling me I'm going to be penalized for it? So we did the same thing that I talked about with some of the other items, right? We rallied the herd. So I went and talked to some middle managers. I went and talked to a group of people, and we basically walked in, a bunch of people with shorts, and said, hey, this is what the teams have asked for. It doesn't cost us anything. It doesn't actually make any changes to our productivity. It makes the teams happier, so let's do it. And in that particular case, I showed up in shorts, and at that point in time, I was pretty used to wearing some pretty fancy stuff to work. I wore shorts and I wore flip-flops. So it's also going and saying, hey, this is what the teams want. It doesn't cost you anything, but then again, rallying that herd to say, hey, we're gonna stand by the teams and we're gonna support the things that are helpful to them. So MC Moore from Atlanta says, but often that is a disconnect between our senior leadership and our middle managers, and that's the source of the problem. I completely agree with you. Do you go by MC or?
I do.
You do. Okay. So yeah, there are lots of nicknames for that middle management group. And so it's what the frozen middle, sludge middle management. But yes, that is typically something that we have to figure out. And so by changing the policies, if you can figure out how do you actually say, hey, we're wasting money on this. We're wasting in quality on this. And here are some easier, better, faster ways for us to resolve these things. It will help us kind of get over that middle management hump. But it's, again, trying to figure out how do you have that conversation with the leadership team. And I say that one of the things that I did as well, I was working on a pretty big, important product where we were making sure the airplanes stay in the sky. So it's kind of highly regulated, kind of important. And I had an internal auditor who came to me and said, Kim, you've failed your SOX audit with all of this stuff. And I was like, okay, let's talk about it. And so they went through their 250 items of things that I did not do or that my 15 teams did not do. And instead we walked them through, oh, you want to see signed off requirements? Here, you can see in Jira where the product owner marked it as ready. Oh, you want to see who tested it? You can see who actually kicked it off. oh, you can see who merged, you know, the code and whatnot. So don't break the rules, but if you were to start off by saying, hey, these 250 things are preventing us from being able to get good feedback real time from our customers. Instead, here's how I can show you each one of those 250 rules or checklist items in a faster way, a more compliant way, not something where someone's going to go in Excel and double click to fill out all of the cells to be the same. So making sure that you're articulating, hey, here are the places that we're wasting time, that we're wasting money, that we're not empowering people, that we're beating them up instead of empowering them. And really figuring out how can we share with leaders that we can do this a better and faster way. MC, does that help to address some of what you're talking about?
That's awesome. Thank you.
Okay, great. Okay, so, and this is my friend Carla. She took a picture with me so that we could share after we had some not nice middle managers. So I also alluded to this on the product piece, but being in Denver, hopefully you all know who Peyton Manning is, and hopefully you've heard him say the word Omaha. But the Standish Group actually came out with a report in 2018 that said that teams that have the ability to make decisions within an hour are 58% likely to be successful. Whereas if I spread that out and take that all the way down to 5 hours, your success criteria, your likelihood for success goes down to 18%. And so I want you to think about Peyton Manning being the product owner of your team and being empowered to make decisions. So there's a call that's played and he has the ability on the field to be able to say, hey, I'm closest to my competitors. I'm closest to the people on my team. I know that the plan that we have isn't going to work. And so by him being able to call out Omaha and say, we're going to go with a different play, he's empowered by the leadership team, i.e. the coaches, to be able to make a change. So we need to make sure that we're leveraging strong, decisive product owners who are available to our teams to be able to make decisions quickly so that we can actually move forward. And this is something that's also very difficult in organizations. They say, you want me to have a product owner for a team? And when you show that your teams are working on the wrong thing because they don't know what else to work on, because they don't have good backlogs, this is something to kind of point back to. So this is a report from the Standish Group that came out in 2018. Okay, I want to tell you real quickly about a story that happened about a year ago. So I was at a Nobel Prize winning hospital and they had a problem. Their problem was that it was taking about an hour for them to turn around their surgical rooms. So there's a surgery that happens, they take the patient out, they clean the room, they stock the room, they bring the next patient in, and then they insert the scalpel to start the surgery. This has nothing to do with IT, just to be clear, not IT at all. And so they were saying, how do we figure out how to actually speed this up? So on average, it was about 45 minutes or so that it was taking to do this. And they had been doing this for 40 years. They had just a lot of time. And is what we did, we actually met with the people who were cleaning the rooms, and we had them doing sprints that were not time boxed. They were just however long it took to get the room turned around. And so we had them basically treat each one of those cleanings as if they were a sprint. And so we'd start off and we'd look in the room and we'd say, how big of a mess is it? And you can imagine how they would be able to judge that pretty quickly. There was one room that I was like, oh my goodness. And so they would say basically small, medium, or large. If it's large, I need to call somebody to get some help because the 4 of us aren't going to be able to do this very quickly. And then they would kind of divvy out like who's going to focus on what will they actually do. And at the end, we would do a retrospective and we would say, how can we actually get better? So you were in there cleaning the operating room. How can we make this better and faster? And so the teams were actually able to significantly improve it. At some point, they were down to about 25 minutes for the overall turnaround time. And so there was a pretty significant improvement. They went through a couple of those rounds, and then their manager walked up and said, "How are things going?" And they said, "Great. We've reduced the time and we've made these improvements." And the manager was like, "You're not allowed to do that. You're going to get hurt, and this is going to happen, and this is going to happen." And so all of a sudden you see all of this joy from the teams who are improving their own process, who do the work every day, who are like, "Well, then why are we doing this thing? Like, why do you have Kim and Kevin here to help us with this?" And so we had to go and have a conversation with the leaders. The leader of that particular area was used to, kind of like Taylorism, coming up with all of the process improvements herself. And she didn't do the work. She was always running around trying to, give people the stuff that they needed to, and kind of doing a Scrum Master type role. So we had to have a conversation with her and say, what's the actual outcome that you're looking for? And instead of responding the way that you did, how can you actually, help them with getting better? So this is a picture of me with the cleaning team at a Nobel Prize winning hospital. And so they reduced it to, I said 25 minutes, but it's 30 minutes. And the goal was not just to get more surgeries in, but it was to help the nurses who were saying, "Hey, I'm working too many hours. I'm always working overtime." And it was to help the employees feel more empowered. These ladies that you see here, most of them work 2 jobs. They would go to another job. And so by having to extend their time to make sure that they got through the surgeries, they were putting at risk their second job. But now each one of these ladies, oh, and this is their manager. Anyway, so each one of these ladies was now going to basically a community of practice and sharing with the other operating room assistants what they were doing. And so they were starting to empower the rest of the teams. So creating a forum and being able to rally that herd and say, what can we do to help share across the organization the things that we're doing better? So that's just a bit of a fun story. So just real quickly on this, Jeff Sutherland, if you hopefully know, he did go to the Air Force Academy down in the Springs. He was a fighter pilot. And one of the things that he talks about as he created Scrum is the OODA loop. And that is constantly making sure that you're getting into inside the decision loop of whoever it is that your opponent is. And there are times when, unfortunately, your opponent might be someone who's in your organization. So MC talked about, well, maybe it's the middle managers who are causing some problems. So we want to figure out, how can we act? How can we observe, orient, decide, and then act again? How can we understand what is it that the people who are not necessarily in alignment with us, what's driving them? What's causing them to act in a different way? But really, how can we get inside their decision loops so that we can do something to kind of throw them a little bit off of their balance, and to strike them, and to really be able to make a difference in how we're going about doing work. So that might be with our products, but it also might be in how do we address particular issues within our culture, within our organization. The last thing that I want to lead you with, and we didn't get back to going to our templates, is this book by Liz Wiseman. And if you haven't read it and you're a Scrum Master or an Agile coach or a leader, I would highly recommend this. This really talks about how can we increase the capability and the intelligence, the actual IQ of our teams by doing, she has the 6 multipliers. And she specifically talks about attracting and optimizing the talent. And that's really by creating a culture where you're creating intensity that requires people to have the best thinking, giving them challenges and pushing them beyond what they know. Openly debating and creating a culture where people are allowed to be open and to have courage and to speak about what it is that they're trying to do. And then to create that ownership and accountability within your team, within your organization, and making sure that you're then talking about those things and elevating those up through the leadership in a way that's meaningful to the organization, and hopefully being able to get the leaders to hear the story that you're trying to tell.
Thank you so much, Kim. This has really been a great, just a great presentation and interaction here. we hope that you'll come back and speak with us again in the future. Got to plug that in, right?
Yeah.
So cool. So thank you everybody for joining us.